don't just want the news, they want the truth. What others hide, I bring to you with evidence. Politics, corruption, human rights. No filters, no fear, just facts. I don't stop until the system shakes. This is Makhdoom Shahabuddin and you're watching Trending Daily. Tonight I bring you an important, wide-ranging briefing drawn from my direct participation in a closed interaction between senior journalists and the Director General ISPR, Lieutenant General Ahmed Sharif Chaudhry. What you are about to hear is not speculation. These are the facts, the figures, and the clear warnings the military has placed before the nation. The message is simple and stark. Pakistan has fought terrorism for years. Our patience and diplomatic efforts have limits, and our armed forces will act decisively to protect our people and our borders. Ladies and gentlemen, let me open with the hard data the DG ISPR shared, because numbers tell the real story of sacrifice. In 2025, Pakistan's counter-terrorism effort has been relentless. The armed forces and law enforcement carried out 62,113 intelligence-based operations. That is roughly 208 operations every single day of the year. Terrorist incidents reported this year are 4,373. The number of terrorists neutralized stands at 1,667. Our martyrs, the men who laid down their lives, 1,073. That list includes 584 soldiers of the Pakistan Army, 133 personnel of other law enforcement agencies, and 356 innocent civilians who were killed while going about their lives. Ladies and gentlemen, breakdown in Khyber region for 2025 stands at 514 terrorist incidents. 77 terrorists were killed. The human cost there was swear. 198 casualties, including 36 members of Pakistan Army and Frontier Corps martyred and 138 injured. One police officer was martyred and 2 injured. 12 civilians were martyred and 11 were injured in Tira Valley alone. These are not abstract statistics. Every number is a family, a street, a village touched by loss. And every operation, 62,113 of them, represents intelligence, courage, and a soldier or policeman putting himself between Pakistan and terrorism. Ladies and gentlemen, the DG ISPR reminded us of the revised National Action Plan, a framework agreed by all parties, which explicitly requires action against the political crime terror nexus. The plan is not purely military. Yes, kinetic operations matter, but the majority of National Action Plan's provisions demand civilian governance, law enforcement reforms, judicial follow-through, regulation of seminaries, and most importantly, confronting the political and economic networks that sustain militancy. The ISPR made the point very clear. Operation alone cannot win this war. If politics protects criminals and traffickers, the army will clear the ground. But the long-term cure requires provincial administrations, courts, and federal agencies to follow through. Ladies and gentlemen, listen to this very carefully. Khyber Tira alone, 12,000 acres of narcotics cultivation in that area. Production remains highly profitable, 18 to 25 lakh rupees per acre. The trafficking chain, the political crime nexus, and the terror angle to this whole drugs mafia is very alarming. These drugs not just fund the militants, but these are transported from Khyber to Peshawar to universities to the markets and all across Pakistan. Who benefits? Terrorist groups, local landlords who protect and tax the trade, criminal networks, and the chains of patronage that often reach back into the external actors. A portion of these profits even flow to the Afghan Taliban regime, which in return provides shelter or political space for these gangs. The DG-ISPR described a grim rental economy. Ladies and gentlemen, the DG-ISPR described a grim rental economy. The TTP collects a so-called usher, an enforced tax from the local population, and in return provides protection to the narcotics traffickers from the law enforcement. The picture is simple and corrosive. Drugs fund terror, politics protects criminals, and civilians pay with their security and lives. Concrete numbers from Khyber in 2025 alone: 508 terror incidents, 60 terrorists killed, 192 civilians and security personnel martyred. This is a local economy of blood. Other examples of the political crime terror nexus mentioned by the DG-ISPR are non-custom paid cars, massive smuggling of Iranian diesel, kidnapping for ransom, extortion, and manipulations in the Afghan transit trade. These are not petty crimes. They are systematically linked to terrorism and must be tackled as part of any durable solution. Now to the Western Front. The events of October that transformed diplomacy into a crisis. During the recent border clashes, Pakistan's response inflicted heavy losses. According to DG-ISPR, 206 Afghan Taliban fighters were killed in the exchanges, and 112 militants of the TTP, the Fitna al-Khawarij, were neutralized in Pakistan's defensive operations. These numbers were presented as evidence that the threat was not imaginary. It was kinetic, organized, and lethal. Pakistan didn't ask for mediation. Afghanistan did. Qatar and Turkey stepped in. Talks were held in Doha and later in Istanbul. Pakistan entered the dialogue with a single focused agenda: stop the use of Afghan territory as a base for cross-border terrorism. Pakistan presented evidence, bodies with Afghan IDs, captured weaponry, and a clear link to known terror infrastructures. Pakistan's diplomatic position was acknowledged by mediators and, according to DG-ISPR, by elements of the Afghan delegation. Yet, despite the evidence, the Taliban regime hesitated to make written, verifiable commitments. At some points, the Taliban said the TTP was an internal Pakistan issue. Pakistan rejected that line. The mediators, Turkey and Qatar, endorsed Pakistan's core demand that Afghan soil must not be used against Pakistan. The benefits of these talks: terrorism from Afghan soil has now been internationalized. Pakistan gave peace a chance, but the ceasefire, the fragile quiet now in place, is conditional. If a terrorist incident is launched from Afghan territory, the ceasefire will be broken. That is Pakistan's red line. Ladies and gentlemen, the DG-ISPR highlighted an alarming information campaign: an Afghan-India disinformation nexus targeting Pakistan. Social media accounts aligned with the Afghan side, amplified by Indian channels, were pushing narratives to deflect responsibility, sow confusion, and delegitimize Pakistan's evidence. The DG-ISPR's words were direct: this is a coordinated and dishonest propaganda, and it aims to change the narrative of who is the aggressor and who is the victim. Pakistan has documented examples and raised them with international partners. Disinformation is now part of the battlefield, and it must be countered with verified facts and consistent diplomacy. Ladies and gentlemen, on the Eastern Maritime Front, the DG-ISPR issued a warning. India is preparing another false flag operation, this time in deep sea. The theory, he said, is blunt. After operational exposures on land and air, a maritime provocation could be used to manipulate international opinion and create a pretext for escalation. The ISPR's message is clear: India can try any theater, land, sea, air, But Pakistan is ready. Sea, land, air, our response will be stronger and better calibrated. Pakistan will not be caught by surprise. When asked about foreign commentary on Pakistan's strategic posture, including references to nuclear signaling or reports about some tests about hypersonic missiles, the DG ISPR replied in a mired term. For national security, like all responsible nations, Pakistan will take necessary measures to safeguard its defense. He neither confirmed nor denied specific speculative reporting. His point was institutional. Sovereignty and security are non-negotiable. Ladies and gentlemen, the DG ISPR was emphatic. The root problem is not only terrorists or geography, it is governance. Criminal networks, corrupt local officials, and political protection give terrorists the breathing space. The revised National Action Plan requires civilian institutions to act. Provincial administrations must enforce the law. Police must be empowered and expanded. Judiciary must speed up trials. Border management must be very robust. The ISPR's demand is precise. Remove political cover for criminals. Enforce the law. Cut the money flows that feed terror. The military will continue to clear and strike, but the long-term success depends on civilian governance. Ladies and gentlemen, as a nation, we must ask ourselves 4 plain questions. Are our provincial institutions doing their part to follow the National Action Plan? Will politicians allow law enforcement to act without interference? Will the international community accept Pakistan's evidence and demand real action from the Afghan side? And finally, are we united enough across parties and provinces to end the criminal economies that finance terrorism? The interaction with DG ISPR made one thing very clear. Pakistan has been patient. It has been restrained. And it has repeatedly chosen diplomacy. But diplomacy has limits, especially when centuries remain and terror continues to kill our people. The ball is now with politicians and with international partners. The military has done its duty. Now our civilian institutions must match the sacrifice. If you value this briefing, share it widely. This is Makhdoom Shahabuddin signing off.